Hello, today we're going to look at flush draws once again because it's a fun hands for recreational players but also very complicated for regulars, as sometimes you play it one way, other times the other way, and overall regulars are not getting close to GTO play with the flush draws. So we're going to look at 5 spots today, from easier to more complicated spot. The 5th one, I'm really curious whether you know what to do, and you will hopefully learn how to play them better after this video. Let's start with the first easy one, especially for newer players. You're on the button against the big blind, you open raise and big blind checks to you. What do you do with the flush draw on this board? Jack 8-3, you have 7-6 of hearts, flush draw. Do you c-bet or do you check it back? What you should know is that with these type of hands, you can do both. Have a look at the solution. You sometimes check flush draws back 38% of the time, and 62% of the time you c-bet them. So with our 7-6 here, we have the option. Both are equally good, so do not forget to sometimes check back flush draws. This is a leak many of you newer players especially will have. Now a second spot where the flush draws are misplayed, and I already see many regulars maybe being aware of this but not executing the spell at all. We are in a 3-bet pot, button against the hijack, we call to the 3-bet out of position, check to our opponent c-bets for 1/3 on queen 7-2, we have a flush draw, king jack suited. What do we do here? What would you do? Would you fold, call, or raise? Obviously you wouldn't fold, but would you raise more or would you call more? The tendency I see is many people see the pot is large, we have a flush draw, fast play these hands a lot. Careful, when you're facing a c-bet with a flush draw in the 3-bet pots, there's no need for you to always be raising this. You guys, or some of you, will raise way too frequently. You should be calling. So if you look at the solution here on this exact board, you see that we call more with all the flush draws, including nutted or non-nutted flush draws, and we also raise, but less than we call. So with our king jack here, it's going to be the same. We have 2 options, and now there's 2 types of players. There's the ones who aren't that aggressive overall, so maybe they're actually quite comfortable calling this, but even for the aggressive player, I would recommend you to sometimes call these hands. Not only because you can see here that it is theoretical fine, but also there's more opportunities to be aggressive. If you're really that aggressive, if you call here, you can check your opponent on the turn and check raise on the turn. That's also an option. So there are several options to raise a flush draw, not only on the flop, so careful not to fast play too much. It is a leak some of you will have. Now to the third situation, again in the 3-bet pot, but this time with the 3-better, we decided to c-bet our flush draw, a7 of hearts on this board, 50% sizing on the flop. Now on the turn, what are you going to do? Are you checking it back or are you going for the second barrel? This is a spot some of you may have awareness, so you know how it works, but in game when you're clicking buttons and not having enough time to think it through, the tendency of you will be to barrel flush draws very frequently. But this is a spot in position we can choose to also realize our flush draw, and therefore checking back has to be an option as well. When you look at the solutions of this spot, it doesn't look as dramatic as I have filtered for the combo draws, flush draw nuts and flush draw, and our range overall contains more suited aces than weaker suited hands, so we have more ace high flush draws in this exact spot. And with the ace high flush draw, even in position when betting it, it's not a problem to face the raise because you will call it off happily. But with a weaker flush draw, where you have the choice to realize your equity by checking it back, you really don't like betting it and then facing the raise. For this reason, when you have a normal flush draw here, always consider checking back. But even with our a7 here, you don't pure bet it. So keep in mind, you c-bet a flush draw, which sometimes you do, but sometimes you check back. But on the turn, again, you don't always have to barrel it just because you c-bet on the flop. Also go for some checkbacks. You don't want to be the person who never has a flush after they check back and the river brings a flush card. But that's not the only reason for it on the turn. Have a look here. Single raise pot, a7-2, the button in single raise pot c-bets. We out of position check raise our flush draw, 6-5, and the turn brings a jack. Would you naturally be barreling this hand or would you be checking this hand? It also has something to do with how you're composing a range. If you always barrel your flush draws, like in this case here, you will be having too many flush draws in your range, so your range could actually be too weak. So here, your 6-5 suited will also need to check. In this case, even 100% of the time with the specific combos. Always keep in mind flush draws mixing also after check raising. can I now find a fourth league some of you will have with flush draws? Let's have a look at the 3-bet pot again. Button hijack, we are the caller. We check called on the flop against a 50% c-bet, and on the turn we check and face a 75% bet. What do we do with our queen 10 suited here? Flush draw, 2 overcards. Do we fold, call, or raise? There will be a tendency for you to again overplay your flush draw here. So you'll be tending to be more aggressive than you should, or in this case, even calling a hand that should be a fold. So on the turn, especially out of position, a league of you will be to not be folding flush draws enough. Have a look at this range. You see that there's not going to be just random shoves too frequently with flush draws, and you should also be aware that you can and must fold them most of the time on this board. Keep in mind that every board is a little bit different. Not every board is going to be like this board. Now, if you think this is only in the 3-bet pot, let's look at the previous board. A7-2, we check raised on the flop in the single pot against button c-bet, this time with queen 5 suited to make it a nicer higher flush draw instead of the low suited connector. And on the turn, we already know we had to check to our opponent sometimes. Remember, not always barreling on the turn. So this is what we did with the queen 5 suited. And now we face a 75% bet, which is not the GTO sizing, but let's assume you could be facing this in real life. What do you do here? Do you think about folding this hand? I know some of you will think about it, but just be aware that there are some hands, even nicer flush draws on the turn, that out of position you just don't have the odds to call. You need to be folding. Now to the 5th spot, and this one is going to be a river spot and a little bit more complex, so a little bit easier for even stronger players to not know what they're doing using wrong simplification of concepts, and this is why we're going to look at a full hand. We are on the cutoff, we open raised the 3-bet, came from the small blind, and we decided to call with king jack suited. We have a flush draw since the board has 10-7 of diamonds and the 4 of hearts, and it is checked to us as a small blind. From what we already saw, the thought process, you can already be aware that this hand could be bet or could be check. This hand actually is a nice hand to be betting here, but can also be checked back, which I prefer to do this time for this video. The turn is a queen of clubs. We picked up a straight draw, so we have a flush and a straight draw, and our opponent decides to bet 75% into us after we check back. What do we do with our hand? Fold is out of the question. Do we call, or are we able to be aggressive here? Some of you love to fast play this combo draws even in position. Careful, there's going to be a clear preference here. With this hand, we are going to call. Now to the river. Our opponent checks to us. Why did I choose this river? Because it's a break, a 2 of clubs. We missed our straight draw, we missed our flush draw. We have king high. What would you do in this spot? And now there's going to be 2 groups of people. There's one group of people, usually a little bit less experienced, who have something in mind. I have king high, I'm going to bluff. But then there's the experienced type of players maybe who think I block all of their misdraws, so I block the flush draws that are going to fold against the bet, I block the straight draws that are going to bet and check it back. Which one applies? Which one am I going to draw your attention to here? Think about this. The answer is, there's going to be the guys, recreational players who don't even think about this. Wrong. You need to realize whether you're blocking flush draws, you aren't blocking. But then there's going to be the oversimplified regular who just says something like, we cannot bluff missed draws, we cannot bluff missed flush draws, they're great combos to just check back. This is also far away from the truth. There are many spots on the river where you need to find bluffs with the flush draw. Let's have a bet with this king jack here, which I on purpose chose not only with the missed draws, but also king high. We could check it back, but according to this sim, the bet is more than fine. Here in the solution, you can see how frequently the low equity diamond hands are going to be bluffed. So regulars, the 5th tip for you is, don't simplify your life by saying I cannot bluff missed flush draws. Instead, study the spot and look whether it applies to the specific situation. Recreationals, unfortunately it is true though, sometimes missed flush draws are not the best hands to bluff. This is a concept for you. If you want more and learn with the pro, contact me for coaching. Here's my email. The name on Instagram or Discord is also Personal Poker Trainer.